Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of Health Sciences Management. And I'm your professor, Professor Roberts. And during this, I'm going to kind of do a recap of the reading for next week. And I'm going to talk about the paper that's due for week 2. So let's go ahead and look at the agenda here, if my computer would work with me. All right. So we'll kind of go over the reading. I'll talk about chapter 1 and chapter 2, which hopefully you guys have read. If you have not read, this is a quick overview. So you can take your time to catch up on the reading when you get a chance, because the reading builds on each other. And some of your later assignments may depend on something you would have read about. So we're going to talk about chapter 1, defining a project, and chapter 2, planning for a project. And then we'll talk about queuing theory, which is our first paper. So our first chapter, we started talking about what is a project. A project is a unique endeavor that is not a regular, operation. Operations are more day-to-day activities, where a project is a one-time thing that once you start it, there is a defined end date or end criteria that lets you know, hey, this project is over, and you move on to something else, maybe another project. So it depends on where you go in life, and in your positions, especially getting a graduate degree, you're hopefully going to get into more senior management. You'll be put in charge of these type of activities. If not in charge of them, you will be overseeing them. So understanding that a project is a unique endeavor that produces something. It can be a service, it can be a product, it can be something that is adding value to your stakeholders, your audience. So let's talk about project life cycle. So the book it kind of bounced around on a couple different ways to define a project life cycle. The Project Management Institute defines it as like initiating or planning, or I should say initiating, planning, and then there's monitoring, controlling, and then there's closing the project. So there's 5 distinct phases, although number 3 and 4, monitoring and controlling, are often combined when you're looking at various places that talk about project management. In our book, they kind of combine that into execution. So while we are doing our project, we need to monitor the status of our project. And if there's going off the rails or just going wrong, we need to control that. So the Project Management Institute divides those into 2 separate areas, but you can't really have one without the other. So the project life cycle, the project could be as short as a month or even shorter, and it could last for years, depending on what it is. For example, a remodeling of a ward in a hospital, that might take a couple months, maybe a year, depending on permitting and all the other things that go along with that. But building a new hospital might take 2 years, 3 years, especially if the criteria changes, like, for example, the community dynamics change. Hospitals, for the most part, are kind of designed for their areas. So if you have a older generation or older population, there might be more geriatric care or elder care type services because that is the predominant population. But if you're in a new area, maybe there's more adolescent care or even infant care type things, because maybe labor and delivery is always packed because people are having kids as fast as they can. So hospitals can vary in their specialty too. Like different trauma centers. Is it a teaching hospital? What is the specialty? Is it a hospital, or is it going to be actually like a medical campus or a medical center where it has so many different services that the term hospital really doesn't apply? For example, like college versus university. A university has several colleges underneath, or it can just have like none. But a college can have schools underneath a college. So here at WVU, at least in the business and economics college, there's no schools, but there's the college level, and then the college is underneath the umbrella of the university. So the project life cycle can vary in length, but it always hits those 5 steps, as I say. But our books, it had a couple four stage examples, and there was a couple others with a little bit longer. But project management in a healthcare environment, this is really going to help you when you look at our paper. This is a healthcare MBA, so you guys are very familiar with the healthcare industry, or you're looking to get into it. But when it comes to a project, the healthcare has some unique goals. Most of the time, I won't say all the time, but most of the time, it's about patient outcomes. You want a positive patient outcome. You want a patient to come in with a complaint, and you want that patient to leave with that complaint lessened or eliminated, depending on what it is. If it's surgery, if it's just a primary care office, there's different ways to look at that. But project management for healthcare, it could be something as simple as our book says, making a safe room in a psychiatric ward for if there is something that gets out of hand, a room that can be locked down. Or maybe building a heliport because now you want to add critical care air transportation, depending on your area. So it really changes. Building a new children's wing like Ruby Hospital is doing, or Ruby Memorial is doing right now. I'm not sure if it's open yet. I haven't heard, but it looks great from the outside. So project management can take a whole new view when it comes to healthcare. And it does the same thing for every industry. For example, if you wanted to do a software package, so information technology, that's a whole different ball of wax when it comes to project management. They use different styles. We'll talk about agile and waterfall methodologies for project management. And each one of them works. It's just some work better for the situation. For example, software development uses agile. And it works great because they do little chunks of the software at a time. Where waterfall, you have one giant project that we're working through. And we're talking about management differences. The book goes on to say about strategic, operations, crisis, and project. So strategic, these are usually the hospital executives coming out and saying, these are our strategic goals, or, strategic management about this. Really, strategic just makes it sound more important. Really, it's what your executive level or your administrative level wants to go in. What direction do they want? Are they trying to reduce patient accidents, or are they trying to reduce slip and falls? Are they trying to reduce needle sticks or sharp sticks, for the nursing and other medical staff? The strategic goal is how the operations, which is the next level of management, is guided along where they're going to go. So if strategic goal is to reduce mishaps, let's say medical mishaps, surgery mishaps, or, sharp sticks, or just injuries in general. Well, operations might create a safety office. And then they can go from there. Maybe there's some education provided to medical providers. Maybe there's actually a procedure put in place in case there is a exposure, because let's say it's a needle, somebody got stuck after it was used on a patient. Well, a procedure would say, okay, this person's going down to the emergency room. They're going to be taking these medications, there should be a set procedure to follow. And that would be under operations. Next, we have crisis. Crisis is the, oh my God, the world is ending. We need to do something. It's reactive. We just had snow over the weekend, and we probably had some silly drivers out there trying to drive in it, which, I didn't, but hey, some people might. And there might have been a lot more car accidents than normal. Well, is that considered a crisis when those people are eventually transported to the hospital? Maybe not, because the ambulances are probably running slower, so they're not all slamming into the emergency room at once, all those patients. But a crisis, let's say a earthquake happens, a forest fire happens, you know, management of those type of events, or let's say a terrorist event, you know, these type of things are reactive, but you try to plan ahead of time for the what if scenarios. What if there's a forest fire in Morgantown? What if there's a terrorist event that happens at, the football game where you have 30,000 spectators? Well, there's going to be some mass casualty activated and probably pulling in resources from all over the area, probably within 100 miles, pulling resources to Morgantown. Those kind of plans might be at your hospital level, might be at your office level, but then again, crisis might be even up at the higher, let's say at the West Virginia emergency management level. So, but as a medical professional, you might be consulted because of your specialty or your experience or your background, and you might be able to give some advice along these routes. And then finally, we have the project management. And this is, we're defined. We have been given a project charter. We know what our goal is, what we're supposed to do. But we have to be aware of what operations is doing and the strategic side is doing, because our project should align with, let's say, the strategic goals, but also not interrupt operations to the point that we can avoid interrupting them. Yes, there might be some issues that might run into, but hopefully your project doesn't run into any type of crisis management. But, we can say we hope, but is it really going to happen? Hopefully not. All right. So that's essentially chapter 1 in a nutshell. If you didn't read it, definitely go ahead and read it. It's a great foundation for this course and learning about project management, especially taking that view from healthcare. It is a unique industry. So chapter 2, how do we choose our projects? How do we choose this project over this one? Is it because this one's cheaper or is this one faster? How do we make that decision? Well, we have some tools that we can do that with. And one of them we classify as root cause analysis. So we can try to find out what a problem is, and then we can develop a project to try to address that problem. Now, be very careful with the root cause analysis because it might cross into the threshold of operations and not really be a project. So that can be an issue, but your leadership should help guide that. Brainstorming, I'm sure you guys have sat in a room and brainstormed solutions, maybe a treatment for our patients, maybe an exercise in your bachelor's degree or even medical school about a certain condition and what could it possibly be. The key to brainstorming is just to get the ideas out in the beginning and don't be negative about an idea. Don't have somebody say, oh, it can be XYZ, and somebody else says, no, it can't be. Don't have that negative part yet. Get all the ideas out until you pretty much run out of ideas. Then go back and start filtering through those ideas. Who knows? Maybe XYZ was the answer, but if someone criticized it right at the beginning, it might not have been found until much later, and that could have been an impact on the outcome of the situation. And the next thing here is consensus building. So once you have a plan of action or a thing of that nature, you need to get people on board. Some people have problems with change. Whether you're changing how they do an activity or who's in charge or, whatever the case may be, people have how can I word it? They like to be comfortable. And if they've been in a certain way of doing things, let's say it's a process, and they've been doing the same process for the last couple of years, they're comfortable in how that process is. But if you try to come in and change it, let's say patient intake, if you change that process, your receptionist or the front desk might not like it. I mean, the nursing staff might not like it. The medical provider might not like it because it's a change. I mean, the patient, they're going to do it because they want to be seen, but they may not like it either. Like I took my son to a allergist appointment, and basically I got asked for a complete medical history of my son when he's only gone to WVU hospitals. He's never been to a provider outside of WVU. I did it, but I was basically regurgitating the information the provider could have found on file. So, unfortunately, duplicate work, but who knows? Maybe I'm just ignorant and I don't understand that that is the best way to do it for that provider. So, trying to get everybody on board and it is difficult. And if you're trying to narrow down, let's say, a plan of action, trying to figure out the person's resistance. Why are they resistant? Once you figure out the why, you can address that resistance. It could be just they don't like you. Well, I mean, you can say, well, it's not about me. It's about this. It's about the patient. It's about the office. It's about the department, whatever the case may be. You can say that. That takes the person or the personal out of it. And the person might buy in because now it's not about you because you made the suggestion, let's say. It's about the customer, the person being served, or the stakeholders. So there's lots of ways to go about it. So you got to find out what works best for you because everybody kind of has their own style when it comes to this. Organizational structure. So our book mentions a functional, a hybrid, or a mixed, and then I'm drawing a blank on the third one, project-based. Should have known that. So functional is what you usually see in most companies. There's a group that works in accounting. There's a group that works over in marketing. There's a group that works over in the warehouse. That's functional. They're separated by their functional duties. But on the project side, kind of skipping over that hybrid middle ground there, we are pulling what the resources we need from each department. So if we need an accountant, we'll ask the accounting department to provide somebody who maybe has XYZ skills. We'll pull somebody from marketing. Just like in healthcare, if you're creating a interdisciplinary team, you know who you may not know who, but you know what skills you need on that team. You might need somebody who deals with, and I'm probably going to butcher some of these things, but you might need somebody from ENT. You might need somebody from orthopedics. You might need somebody from, different areas. You might need 3 nurses that are from critical care. Whatever the case may be, the skills you need and the specialties, but for the project, and you basically ask for them. Now, depending on how important your project is, you might not be asking, you might be telling. So, but if you're going to try the telling route, try to make it easier on whoever the manager is because they don't have a choice. So going in there and asking and making it seem like they are giving permission would go a long way, especially, the touchy-feely people side. If you go in there and say, I'm taking this person, they're going to fight you. Not physically, but they're going to do what they can to try to not let you have that person. So we have that middle ground. I believe the book called it Matrix. So you kind of have a combination of both, of the functional and the project. So you have essentially people that would say work in accounting, but they are not really in an accounting department. They just go from project to project or, task to task. They actually have one supervisor until that project's done, and then they move on to another project and they're working under another supervisor. But they also have an accounting supervisor, so like an accounting manager. So they essentially have 2 bosses at the same time, but depending on the maturity of the company and in their projects, the project management maturity would depend on who has more power or authority over that person. So if it's a weak project structured organization, the functional manager is going to have more power. If it's a strong project management company, the project manager is going to have more power. So it really depends on the structure and for the matrix style structure. So regulatory considerations, there are so many regulations out there regarding healthcare that I can't even begin to, talk about them. Well, there's a very common one, HIPAA, Health Insurance and Portability, or Health Insurance Portability Protection Act. Yeah, a lot of people misunderstand this one, and it's about that law was essentially put in place so the medical provider or the medical office can send your medical information to the insurance provider to get paid. That is the essential thing of this law. But a lot of people think it's HIPAA, I can't talk to you about that. Technically, no. I mean, but, it's your private information. If you want to share it, go for it. If you don't, okay. But that law basically, in a nutshell, allows information to go between the medical provider and the insurance company so insurance claims can be paid. But there's a lot more regulatory considerations out there. If you want to put a helipad at your hospital, well, it's a helipad, has a helicopter. Helicopters are regulated by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. So you have to coordinate with them to put a helipad there. There might be certain restrictions there. If you want to build a hospital somewhere, you have to comply with zoning laws. Now, of course, zoning laws can be easily modified by going to the city council, county commission, whatever the case may be, but you can't just plop a hospital down anywhere you want. An ambulance service, they're regulated by the state. So the state says they need to have X number of equipment on there for different levels. If they're basic life support, advanced life support, they need to have certain equipment. I mean, in North Carolina, where I was an EMT, they even went as far as the siren of that ambulance had to be heard 200 yards away, and it had to be at a certain volume. They went into that detail of regulation. And I mean, they even said it had to have a functional horn. Like you press the center of the steering wheel, the horn honks. Had to have a functional horn. So while that's kind of getting picky, in my opinion, now there's probably some very good reason for that, you have to comply with the regulations in the jurisdiction you're at. So if you're a prescription writing provider, you have FDA regulations to follow. Class 2, 3, 4, or whatever number of classes there are of medications. In order to prescribe a class 2, you probably have to go through some additional training about narcotics and opiates and stuff like that. And, have to document certain things in the record. Once it gets to the pharmacist, they probably have to do some checking too. But, in order to get class 1s are generally like, cocaine and stuff like that, right? That kind of stuff is generally not even obtainable by most people. Usually it's like research only. When I was in the military, I was able to get it, which was an accident. I ordered the wrong item. One number different on a part number got me a quantity of cocaine. Needless to say, that went straight to the local military police, and they dealt with it from there. But I did not like sitting through those conversations because, they did their investigation and such. But regulations are everywhere. We just have to usually get lawyers involved and learn about these regulations. Unfortunately, I don't believe there's anybody in the world that can know all the regulations for a specific area. So, no, that's why getting consultants and lawyers, and hopefully you get enough people looking that you hit all of them. And when you do get informed of a regulation that you might have missed, it's easy to comply with, hopefully. All right, so the first paper. The first paper is relatively easy, in my opinion. So I want you guys to research what is queuing theory and how can it be applied to a healthcare setting. So queuing theory is It's a branch of mathematics. It was actually a Danish mathematician that came up with it in the early 1900s. That they there's a lot of math behind how lines form. So, for example, if you go to Walmart and you see 4 registers open, which is probably a shocker right there, but you see 4 registers open, which line do you get in? You might walk past all of them to see how long the lines are, how many items the people have in the lines. But then you see, let's say, a 5th line open, but you see somebody with an overflowing shopping cart go into that line. Which line do you pick? That's what queuing theory is about, and understanding why people pick certain lines. Now, you can apply this in all sorts of different ways. So I recommend that you guys do a little bit of research. I'm not expecting dissertation level research or even a thesis, but I'm looking for you guys to understand the concepts, the theory. So you watch some YouTube videos, do some Google searching, look at peer-reviewed journals, whatever the case you want to do. So you're going to come together as a team to write this paper. I'm looking for 5 pages of writing. So if you add a title page, if you add an abstract page, great. I mean, I'll read them, but they're not necessary. I do need references if you do write, if you use them. So I'd like you guys to use the APA version 7 citation style. That way I'm very familiar with it, so it's easy for me to understand what is what in there. So your inline citations and your references at the end as APA version 7. The formatting of the paper, don't worry about formatting. Just type it, and the reference page, please use the version 7 formatting. That's what I'm looking for this paper. But I don't want you guys to worry about the math that you might come across. The math can get pretty complex if you are not familiar with it. It even confuses me, but I don't claim to be any type of mathematician. So don't worry about the math. Just worry about the theory behind it. And if you guys have any questions, send me an email. That way I can help answer them or try to resolve these for you. I did send out emails to everybody about who was on what team. That's the list of teams that I got from the program coordinator. And if those teams are not correct, let me know. I don't want to reinvent the wheel when it comes to teams. So my understanding is that you guys might not have been in teams last semester, but you were in teams last spring, maybe, or over the summer, or whatever. You guys are 8-week sessions, so you probably had a summer class. But that's the list I got. The couple emails I got back said they were good. But if you have any problems, let me know. And I'm always here for you guys. If you need to talk, send me an email. We can set up a time. I'm pretty flexible on time, especially for you guys, because this is an online class. But send me an email. We'll set up a Zoom session or Teams, whatever works for you. And yeah, I'm looking for some great papers from you guys. Like I said, it's about the theory of you guys understanding the theory, not the math. I'm not looking for a dissertation or a thesis. So, yeah. But with that being said, I think I've talked enough. I'm looking at about 29 minutes. So I wish you guys the best this week, and I look forward to seeing your papers. All right. You have a great night and stay safe.